Men, the most effective manipulation tactics in relationships aren't the obvious power plays you'd immediately recognize. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. Trick 1. The explosive reaction to minor issues. She responds to small problems, minor disappointments, or trivial situations with disproportionate emotional reactions. Tears, anger, or extended upset that doesn't match the actual severity of what happened. A forgotten text, a slightly late arrival, or a minor miscommunication triggers a massive emotional response that leaves you scrambling to fix something that shouldn't have been a crisis. What this actually accomplishes, this pattern trains you to be hyper-vigilant about every small detail of your behavior because you've learned that anything could trigger a massive reaction. The disproportionate responses make you responsible for managing her emotions by ensuring you never make any mistakes, no matter how minor. You become so focused on avoiding triggers that you lose sight of whether her reactions are reasonable in the first place. Notice what types of issues trigger these explosions. If they're consistently about things that give her leverage over you, your time, attention, priorities, or other relationships, she's not actually upset about the specific incident. She's using emotional explosions to establish control over those areas of your life by making the consequences of disappointing her so severe that you avoid it at all costs. Watch how quickly she escalates compared to attempting normal communication first. If she goes from 0 to crisis without ever expressing mild disappointment or discussing the issue calmly, she's choosing explosion as the first response rather than the last resort. This reveals the reaction is strategic rather than an inability to control emotions. She's capable of measured responses, but chooses not to use them. Pay attention to whether these explosions resolve once you apologize or fix the issue, or whether they extend for hours or days. If she continues processing the incident long after you've addressed it, she's milking the situation for maximum impact. The extended emotional consequence teaches you that even successfully fixing problems doesn't end the punishment, which makes you even more desperate to avoid problems entirely. Observe how other people in her life handle similar situations with her. If friends, family, or co-workers also walk on eggshells around her, or mention that she's sensitive, intense, or requires careful handling, it's not just how she is with you. It's a pattern of using disproportionate reactions to control people. If she's only like this with romantic partners, she's specifically using this tactic where she has the most leverage. Why this is manipulation. This trick is manipulation because she's weaponizing emotional intensity to make you responsible for perfect behavior while she's responsible for nothing. The disproportionate reactions aren't genuine emotional responses to actual problems. They're strategic overreactions designed to make you so afraid of triggering her that you constantly monitor and restrict your own behavior to keep her calm. Trick 2. The hot and cold interest pattern. She alternates between showing intense interest in you, your life, and your connection, and then becoming inexplicably disengaged, distracted, or emotionally unavailable. When she's hot, she's fully present, asking questions, making plans, and acting invested. When she's cold, she's giving one-word responses, cancelling plans, or acting like you're an inconvenience. What this actually accomplishes, this pattern creates addiction to her attention by making it variable and unpredictable. The psychological principle of intermittent reinforcement means you'll work harder for variable rewards than consistent ones. When you never know if you'll get engaged her or distant her, you become focused on figuring out what causes each version to appear, putting you in a constantly reactive state, trying to bring back the engaged version. Notice whether there's any correlation between her interest level and your pursuit of her. If she becomes more engaged when you pull back, and more distant when you're pursuing, she's deliberately using availability manipulation to keep you chasing. She's trained herself to respond to your attention level rather than genuinely feeling different levels of interest, which means the mood swings are strategic rather than authentic. Watch how she explains or justifies the cold periods. If she blames stress, busyness, or external factors without acknowledging the pattern of fluctuation, she's avoiding accountability while maintaining the behavior. If she acts like you're being needy or demanding for noticing the difference between her engaged and disengaged versions, she's gaslighting you about obvious behavioral changes. Pay attention to how quickly she can shift between hot and cold. If she can go from intensely engaged to completely distant within hours or even minutes, based on whether she got what she wanted from the interaction, the moods aren't genuine emotional states. They're performances based on utility. Real emotional states don't shift that rapidly unless there's serious psychological instability. Observe whether the cold periods coincide with her having other options, attention sources, or opportunities. If she becomes distant when she's getting attention elsewhere or has other social plans, then becomes engaged when she needs something from you or has nothing else going on, you're her backup option rather than her priority. The mood swings correlate with whether she currently needs your validation. Why this is manipulation? This trick is manipulation because she's deliberately creating instability to keep you focused on earning the good version of her, rather than questioning why there's such dramatic variation in the first place. Healthy interest doesn't swing wildly between extremes. It remains relatively consistent because it's based on genuine feelings rather than strategic availability management. Trick 3. The happiness hijack right. When you're in a good mood, celebrating something positive, or feeling content, she introduces a problem, complaint, or emotional need that immediately shifts focus to her and requires you to abandon your positive state to address her negative one. Your good news gets interrupted by her crisis, your celebrations get dampened by her sudden upset, or your contentment gets disrupted by her urgent need for attention. What this actually accomplishes: this pattern prevents you from experiencing sustained positive emotions independent of her, which makes you psychologically dependent on her for happiness, while she faces no equivalent restriction on her emotional states. You learn that your good moods are vulnerable to her interventions, so you stop fully relaxing into positive experiences. Meanwhile, she never adjusts her expression of negative emotions based on your state, creating an imbalanced dynamic where you manage your happiness around her feelings, but she never manages her complaints around yours. Notice the timing of when she brings up problems. If she consistently waits until you're happy, excited, or celebrating something to introduce issues, complaints, or her own emotional needs, it's not coincidence. She's specifically targeting your positive states because that's when you have emotional resources she can redirect toward her. If she needed to discuss these issues, she could do it during neutral moments, but she chooses your high points instead. Watch whether the problems she introduces actually require immediate attention, or whether they could have waited. If she's bringing up relationship issues from last week, complaints about something non-urgent, or processing emotions about situations that aren't current crises during your celebration dinner, the timing is deliberate. Real urgent matters happen randomly. Strategic mood killings happen when you're happy. Pay attention to whether she shows any awareness that her timing is poor. If she acknowledges she's interrupting a good moment but does it anyway, she's consciously choosing her emotional needs over your experience. If she doesn't acknowledge it at all and acts like her timing is irrelevant, she fundamentally doesn't consider your emotional states worth protecting. Observe whether this pattern makes you hesitant to share good news or express happiness around her. If you find yourself downplaying achievements, hiding excitement, or waiting to celebrate until you're away from her, you've been trained that positive emotions make you vulnerable to her interventions. You're preemptively managing your happiness to avoid giving her opportunities to disrupt it. Why this is manipulation? This trick is manipulation because she's systematically conditioning you to associate your happiness with vulnerability by targeting your positive states for disruption. The pattern isn't about her actually needing support during these moments. It's about ensuring you never get too comfortable or too happy independent of her, which keeps you emotionally tethered and prevents you from realizing you might actually be happier without the relationship. Trick 4. The manufactured emergency. She creates or exaggerates situations into emergencies that require your immediate attention, emotional labor, and resources to resolve. Then, once you've mobilized to help, the crisis either resolves itself quickly, wasn't as serious as presented, or she suddenly doesn't need the help she demanded. The pattern repeats with different crises, but the same urgency and the same rapid de-escalation once you've responded. What this actually accomplishes, this pattern keeps you in reactive mode, where you're constantly preparing to drop everything for her needs, which prevents you from developing independent focus, priorities, or boundaries. The manufactured urgency trains you to treat her problems as always more important than whatever you're doing. And the rapid de-escalation, once you respond, proves your responsiveness rather than actually resolving problems, making your reaction the real goal. Notice what types of situations become emergencies. If they're consistently things she could handle herself, situations where she has other support options she's not using, or problems that seem to only become critical when you're busy with something else, she's strategically creating urgency rather than experiencing genuine crises. Real emergencies don't wait for convenient timing to become critical. Watch what happens after you respond to the emergency. If the crisis quickly resolves, wasn't as bad as she described, or she suddenly has it handled once you've shown you're willing to help, the emergency was a test of your responsiveness rather than a genuine need for help. She's measuring whether you'll drop everything for her, not whether you can actually solve the problem. Pay attention to how she responds if you can't immediately help. If she becomes angry, hurt, or punishing when you have legitimate reasons you can't drop everything, she's not actually looking for problem solving. She's demanding demonstration of priorities. If she easily finds alternative solutions when you're unavailable, the urgency was manufactured because real emergencies don't have flexible timelines. Observe whether there's a pattern of crises during important moments in your life. If emergencies consistently happen during your work deadlines, family events, personal plans, or times when you've communicated you need focus, she's deliberately creating competition for your attention. She's not comfortable with your focus being elsewhere, so she manufactures situations that force you to prove she's your priority. Why this is manipulation? This trick is manipulation because she's weaponizing crisis to control your time, attention, and priorities without having to directly demand that control. By creating urgent situations, she makes you feel like a bad partner for not responding immediately, when actually she's a manipulative partner for creating false urgency to test your compliance. Trick 5. The post-conflict personality reset. After arguments, conflicts, or periods of tension, she completely resets to acting normal or even extra affectionate without ever processing what happened, discussing resolution, or acknowledging the previous issue. The dramatic shift from upset to fine leaves you confused about whether the problem is solved, whether you're forgiven, or whether the issue will resurface. But asking questions about it gets treated like you're bringing up old issues or can't let things go. What this actually accomplishes, this pattern prevents actual conflict resolution and accountability because problems never get fully addressed. They just get temporarily dropped. The sudden mood reset trains you that trying to process conflicts or reach understanding is less important than just accepting when she's moved on. You learn to take whatever version of her is currently present without expecting consistency, understanding, or closure about what actually happened. Notice what triggered the shift from upset to fine. If she resets after you apologized, compromised, or gave her something she wanted. The reset happened because she got the outcome she needed, not because the underlying issue was resolved. If she resets randomly, without any resolution conversation, she's teaching you that her moods change based on internal timing rather than actual problem solving. Watch whether the unresolved issues resurface later. If problems that she seemed fine about suddenly reappear during new conflicts, she never actually processed or forgave them, she just shelved them temporarily. The reset was a pause rather than resolution, and she's keeping score of unresolved issues to use as ammunition later. Pay attention to how she responds if you try to discuss what happened after she's reset. If she acts like you're dwelling on the past, can't let things go, or are causing new problems by bringing up old ones, she's making you responsible for continuity and pattern recognition while she faces no accountability for her mood swings or the unresolved issues that caused them. Observe whether you feel relieved or confused when she resets. If you're relieved the conflict is over, you're being trained to prefer her mood changes over actual resolution because they're easier. If you're confused about what just happened and where things stand, you're recognizing that the reset didn't actually fix anything. It just ended the uncomfortable moment without addressing the underlying problem. Why this is manipulation. This trick is manipulation because she's avoiding accountability and resolution by simply changing moods, which trains you to accept whatever emotional state she presents without expecting consistency, honesty, or actual problem solving. The personality reset isn't her moving on healthily. It's her avoiding the work of actual conflict resolution while maintaining control through unpredictability.